So thanks so much for joining. Just to introduce myself real quick, I'm Siciliano. I lead the Power Automate product here at Microsoft. I've been working on Power Automate since before it was Power Automate. It used to be called Microsoft Flow. So if you're familiar with that, that's what Power Automate is today. So to kick us off, I want to use a slide that I've used many times before in many of my customer presentations that really represents what we think about, and that is how Power Automate and Teams really work very well together. So you're familiar with Teams, you know that there's no other option really for automation and workflow inside of Teams. There's no Outlook rules, there's no SharePoint workflow. Really, the tool that you have at your disposal to do automation, to do advanced logic, to do rules, to do workflows is Power Automate. And we really take that to heart because our goal has been to make sure that Power Automate in the context of Microsoft Teams is just as seamless and as amazing as possible. So we'll talk about some of those in the session here today. But before we dive into specifically Power Automate and Teams, I wanted to spend just a couple minutes talking about our broader automation strategy with Power Automate. So when you think about automation end to end, it's a lot more than just, running a few steps in an automated script. It actually starts from thinking about where does the data come from and how do I understand the processes that are going on inside of my organization. So there's a set of technologies called process intelligence or process mining that help you to understand what's going on. And oftentimes there's going to be paper forms. As much as we love Teams, the fact of the matter is in a lot of businesses, people still use fax machines. So being able to take the data from those legacy technologies and ingest it and use artificial intelligence to understand what's going on there and then do something with it is really important for automation. Then in the core, in the center of that diagram is the actual automation engine. And that's, there's different types of systems that you can connect to. There's going to be legacy systems that really only run on a desktop, like a legacy Win32 application or a system like SAP, terminal servers. There's, of course, modern systems as well. Teams is the best example of a SaaS service. It was built from the ground up to be native in the cloud. But in any organization, there's going to be a ton of different services that you want to connect to and use as well. Oftentimes, in addition, you need people to be a part of a process. So you can't just have a purely automated process. You also have to have strategic thinking, decision making, people advancing step by step through a process. So that's also an important part of what we kind of call that core engine. And then oftentimes, you're going to want to further refine and optimize the end-to-end scenario by using low code to build applications. So what's great about Power Automate and the rest of the Power Platform is that we have technologies that can meet all of the needs of automation inside of an organization. So it starts on the left from technologies like our Process Advisor, which is actually a new technology that's in preview today, and that allows you to record your manual processes that you're doing on your PC every single day. And then it can provide analytics and visualizations about how to optimize that process. And you don't even have to do that alone. You and your colleagues, all of your team can go and record that process, and it can combine together the data from all of those different people. We have AI Builder, which allows you to take that that fax document and understand what's on it to get the different fields in the data. Power BI, of course, brings in rich insights on top of the data that you have. At the core, again, really we have a few different types of flows. We have our desktop flows, which run and connect to those legacy systems. We have cloud flows, which, if you've heard of Microsoft Flow before, that's probably that technology that you have in mind when you think about Power Automate. And then we have our approvals and business processes as well. So all of these technologies work together to create a holistic automation ecosystem. And in the context of Microsoft Teams, all of these different technologies are, of course, very useful. So it's not just about, cloud flows automating a single process. It's really about the end-to-end scenario that you can build on top of Microsoft Teams. Now, before I go on, I just want to touch on one thing that I won't spend any more time on is Dataverse for Teams. And Dataverse for Teams is really interesting because it provides a way to have a tabular data store that is associated with each team. So if you want additional data that you can sit alongside your team, you want to track orders, you want to track customers, you want to track any type of thing with your team, you can use Dataverse for Teams. And what's really important about that, as well as these other technologies on the slide, is that they're available for free at no additional cost to anybody with a Teams license. Now, that being said, there are, of course, premium capabilities that you can pay for in addition to Dataverse that's included with Teams, but there's a ton just out of the box available for you to get started with. So with that, let's dive a little bit more into cloud flows and how those are really integrated with the Microsoft Teams ecosystem. So Power Automate cloud flows always start from what we call a trigger. A trigger is some event that happens inside of your workflow. So there's two different types of triggers. The first type of trigger is what we call an instant trigger. And that's something that's run explicitly on demand by somebody who wants to kick off a process. And in the context of Teams, the instant trigger is called for selected message. And really what that means is when you select an action on a message, it's going to immediately go and run that workflow. And it has the context of that message alongside. The other types of triggers are what we call automated triggers. And automated triggers will run in the background, always waiting, always listening for something to happen. And that something is not going to be an explicit running of a workflow. It's going to be an implicit action that is taken by anybody in the context of Teams. So some good examples of this are when somebody joins a Teams channel, when somebody posts a message, or if there's somebody being removed from a channel. These different types of actions that happen will implicitly kick off a workflow. So that's how you can have kind of automated behaviors that run in the background. So one of the things that's really interesting, particularly about the instant triggers, is that not only can they be run on demand from a message, but they can also collect data from someone when they kick off that workflow. So that is powered by something that we call adaptive cards. And what an adaptive card is it's a super lightweight way to build an input form that can be associated with a button inside of Microsoft Teams. So for example, I have a flow and I want to have that flow kick off an order. I may need to collect some details about that order. I may need, the order quantity, the order code, and who the order is for. I can add those 3 text fields to an adaptive card just using the drag and drop interface that we have inside of Power Automate. And then when I run that flow inside of Teams, it will ask me those 3 pieces of information, and then I can go off and run the process. And adaptive cards can be used not only at the beginning of a flow to kick it off, but they could also be used in the middle of a flow to add additional information to a process. So it's really a great way from inside of Teams to collect additional information as a part of the workflow that you're building out. Now, it's not just this type of action. There's actually 32 different actions that we have inside of Power Automate that help you to automate all the different aspects of Microsoft Teams. So that can be working with the people inside of a Teams channel. So if you want to manage who's coming in, who's leaving, you can add, remove members, you can create channels, all those great types of things. But the most common scenarios are, of course, just working with messages, posting new messages. You can reply to existing messages. You can post those adaptive cards that I mentioned. And all of those different types of things help people to really collaborate together in the context of Microsoft Teams. So those are really kind of the fundamental building blocks. But let's look at how people get started inside of Microsoft Teams. So the way to get started is by installing the Power Automate app in Teams. So if there's kind of one takeaway that I have for you today, it's go to Microsoft Teams. You're already there right now. Don't stop watching. But what you can do afterwards is you can search for and install the Power Automate app if you haven't already done that. And what's great about the Power Automate app inside of Teams is it creates a tailored experience for working with flows in Teams. So it filters it down, right? So you just see the flows related to the teams. It shows you a bunch of templates related to teams. And what's great about this is it also even shows for every single flow, what is the associated team and channel that that flow is touching. So if you want to see across all of your flows, the different channels that they're working with, it's really easy to see that right in line there inside of the Teams app. So now, not only does it make it easy to kind of manage and see your existing flows, it also makes it really easy to get started with new flows. So we've released something that we call a diet designer. It's a pretty bad name, but really what it is meant to represent is it's just really simple and constrained to get started with a process inside of Flow. So one of the challenges historically has been that setting up a flow from a template could be complicated. There could be, different inputs on different actions that can make it hard to get started. But as you see here on the screen, all you need to do is provide just the required inputs to that flow, and then it'll create it right there. That's all you need to do. There isn't a lot of complex setup. It's really a streamlined, fast, easy process to get started right inside of Teams. And this works for all the templates that we have inside of Teams to get started with. So again, our goal really is to make it as easy for anybody to get started inside of Teams. So we have a lot of different templates, and the templates are there as a way to help people get started very quickly. And you can see here, the text is maybe a little small, but some of these templates have been used a lot. So, creating a task in Planner and posting a message to Teams, that template has been used 40,000 times. So a lot of these templates are getting really exciting usage, and you can browse this gallery, get started very easily. And the other thing you can do is these templates can be customized to meet your needs. So that's one of the really important things of Power Automate is although we're focused on these simple, easy to get started experiences, it has the full power of a low-code platform behind it, which means that if you want to customize that process, you want to add additional steps in, you want to change the wording of the message, you want to add your own logos onto those cards, you can do that all with the power of Power Automate. So the next thing I want to talk a little bit about is approvals. So just like we have the cloud flows that are kind of those automated pieces that run entirely in the background, approvals are a little different in that they involve, a person making a decision. So we have also improved and streamlined the approval experience inside of Teams. And what's great about this is it can be done without ever setting up a workflow in the first place. So everybody inside of Teams now should see an approvals icon that sits just below the message box. And what that does is when you click that button right from wherever you are, it'll kick off a dialogue like you see here to start an approval process. And in that approval process, you can provide who you want to be the approver, additional details about that approval request, as well as even attachment. So if you want to attach a file to that approval, you can do that as well. And what's the most important thing about this is this experience, again, is entirely inside the context of Teams. So if I want to then approve that request, I get a notification, right inside of Teams using the native Teams notifications, and there's an approvals app that you can install in addition to the Power Automate app, where you can see a list of all of the approvals that you have, all the different ones you've received, who you've received it from, the attachments to that approval, the history of the activity on that approval, all inside the context of that app. So the message here is really, you don't even have to worry about the fact that behind the scenes it's Power Automate. Of course, I love Power Automate, so I'm biased. I want people to know about how awesome it is and how customizable everything is. But if you're just a regular person that just wants to get a quick approval from your manager or from a colleague, you don't have to care about that. You can just get started with approvals inside of Teams. So before I jump into the future roadmap that I'm sure people are excited about, I figured I'd do just a quick demo and walk through some of these experiences that I've been talking about. So inside of Teams, the first thing that I mentioned was the ability to install that new Power Automate app. And the Power Automate app, you can, of course, pin to your taskbar like you can anywhere else. And when you kick that app open, it shows you a list of flows that are specific to whatever it is that you're doing. So in this case, I'm inside of Teams, so I see my Teams flows. If I want to see all my other flows, I can do that as well, but I don't have to do that. Next, you can see there's that type column. And that goes back to that statement I made earlier about the two different types of triggers. There's the instant flows that run on demand when somebody is in the context of Teams. And there's the automated flows that run kind of implicitly in the background automatically when something happens. At the bottom here, we have all the templates. So let's take a look at how each
I don't know if everybody else is hearing that, but we're getting some sound quality issues on your mic.
Is this any better?
That's much better. Thank you.
Okay, great. So the templates here, I can browse. So I can set a template to do, for example, a welcome message when somebody joins the team. And I can, of course, customize that welcome message however I want. So this now is that simplified designer experience that I was talking about. And the designer experience, asked me to provide a title, and I can just use the default one, or I can provide a custom one here. And then it just has the required inputs. That's all I have to do. I don't have to provide, the layout of the flow or the conditional logic. In this case, we want to know, what is the team that I'm looking for? What is the team that I want to post to? And what is the channel inside of that team that I'm going to post the welcome message in? So that's all I had to do. I can click Create Flow right now, and it'll be set up. But of course, the part of the value of Flow is that I can further customize this. So if I want to change this text, if I want to, make it, yellow or whatever it may be, I can do that as well. So I go ahead, create flow, and that's pretty much it. So I have now been able to create a new process inside of Teams in just a few seconds, really. Now, the next thing I want to show is how easy it is to run flows on messages. So that instant trigger piece. So that first one, that's an automated trigger, but now what I can have is an instant trigger. So I have a flow here that I created, and it's a really basic flow, and all it will do is it will just say hello to the person who triggers the flow. But what this shows is that adaptive card that I mentioned, and the adaptive cards are really powerful because I can provide images, I can provide text, I can change the fonts and all of the different parts of this process that I want. So if I want to make this large or extra large and I want to make it bolder, I can change the color, so that way it kind of matches the team's colors here. I can add additional text boxes. So I can say, this is going to be some description, and that's all I have to do to build these forms that will show up inside of Teams. So I can just save this card and save the flow. And now I have a form that can actually show up attached to any types of Teams message. So let's take a look at how this works inside of Teams. So I can come here, and in more actions, that flow shows up. So this is the flow that I just edited. So you noticed it already has the changes that I just made to the flow. So I added that second text box. I made this text bold, just using that adaptive cards editor here. So I can provide some additional details, hit submit here, and that's how easy it is to run a flow on top of a message inside of Teams. The other thing I can do is, of course, I can start approval processes. So I can come here and click that approvals button that's right inside of Teams, and I can provide additional details, order number 3,
who I want to approve this request, any additional information. What's great about approvals is, by default, it's going to do approve, reject. But if you want, you can add custom responses in too. So, I could have things like yes, maybe, as two different options instead of, yes, no, if I don't want to have, a harsh response. I can add attachments or, do other types of things there as well. So with that, I can go and I can look at the approvals that I have as well. And you can see here, I made that approval request. If I click on it, down there, I got the notification, by the way. My buttons, yes and maybe, showed up. And that was all I had to do to create an approval process, right? I didn't even have to set up a flow in the first place. I was just able to do that from right inside of Microsoft Teams. So I hope that has been useful, just to give you a sense of all the different places that flows show up. But the one other thing I want to show is Power Automate Desktop. So Power Automate Desktop is really exciting because it's a way to automate not just those connectors in the cloud, but also programs running on your PC. So for example, I could have a process that I want to kick off that takes data from an Excel workbook and searches for information on a website. So I can actually open up Power Automate Desktop here. This is available for free for all Windows 10 users. So anybody who's using Microsoft Teams and Windows, they can actually get Power Automate Desktop now at no additional cost and use it to automate tasks on their PC. And what this process is going to do is it's going to take some data from this workbook, and then it's going to search the different companies in the workbook on a website. In this case, I can just look up company information on Crunchbase. So this is actually live. This is going and automating my my web pages. My hands are here. I'm not touching anything, and it's going and running this process right here. And this is really exciting because now you can really take any manual task that you're doing on your PC and automate it. And because you can have these buttons inside of Teams that can kick off processes, I can even have a button right here that goes, right here, and goes and runs that process that I just did of automatically opening different web pages, pulling information, sending it back and forth. So this holistic automation story, I think, is really exciting and brings all the different pieces together. So yeah, so that's what I just mentioned. And Power Automate Desktop can connect to a wide variety of different systems in a way to really bring it all together, no matter whether you're automating something new or old, a legacy system, or something in the cloud. So the last thing I want to touch on is some of the features that are coming inside of Power Automate and Microsoft Teams. So over the past year, we've continually released features. Every single quarter, we have new features available for people to use. And I've already talked about all these features here, but you can see, just this ongoing drumbeat of new capabilities inside of Teams. So now I want to spend just a couple minutes talking about the new features that we have coming. So these are all going to be coming in the next release wave. The release wave is basically 6-month upcoming time period. And some of these features are really about how to continue to improve the experience inside of Teams. For example, that last feature I think is really interesting on the list there, which is you can have Teams templates, right? That are kind of pre-configured teams that you can get set up. Well, soon you'll be able to include a flow or flow templates with those Teams templates. So you can install it all at once and you get these workflows that we've been talking about alongside the rest of the teams. Some of the other things are we're going to be getting started with flows in more places. So that way, if you want to kick off a flow from the message extensions at the bottom there where approvals are as well, you'll be able to do that too. But more importantly, you'll also be able to create flows in each of these contexts. So that experience I showed you was really just running an existing flow. What if you want to create a new flow right from inside of Teams? Well, you can do that on the messages in the future as well. So these are just some mock-ups of what we're doing. So the features aren't available yet, but in the next few months, you'll see this new capability come that will really add contextual flow creation. The other thing that's really exciting is the ability to have flows created from the Teams store. So there'll be a new section in the store that gives you a list of all of the Teams templates. So you can go to the Teams store and see all the different types of workflows that are specific to Teams, and you can create them right from there. And you'll get that same simple experience that I showed with that Diet Designer to kick off processes there as well. So with that, I think I have a few minutes left for Q&A, so we can go ahead and see what questions there are that are out there.
Okay, not so much questions, but not realizing that things existed, which is as good as a question.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is I'll take everybody, I'll give everybody the ability to take themselves off mute so they can ask you questions. Please don't be shy. Please do ask. You don't get many opportunities to ask directly. There we go. You should now be able to take yourself off mute if you want to ask a question.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Aha, yeah. Thank you very much for that session. That was really awesome. There are a lot of stuff I saw that I never knew. You know, I just quickly checked my Teams and I saw that I even had access to those features. So
Yep.
it's really amazing. And I think that's one of the importance of gatherings like this anyway. So thank you very much for that. But looking at the presentation, I now begin to wonder that what's the future for we app makers? So because one thing I see that they're trying to do with Teams here is they are trying to empower like the general users. So for example, look at the approval process. You know, in my organization, we actually spend time building a Power App that allows team members to be able to just launch an approval process. But now I was able to see that even from within Teams, you can do the same thing. So me as an app maker, I'm beginning to feel threatened that having all of these features coming, what will we be left to do if every business user is able to do this?
So I wouldn't be too worried yet. The interesting thing that we have done is we have included a basic approval process, but most organizations are going to need to further customize and tailor the processes to meet your organization's needs. So I think there still is a huge opportunity for app makers such as yourself to be able to take the kind of the templates that we have and the approval processes and make them, you know, unique to your organization. The other thing that's really interesting is building out templates for other people in your organization to use. So although using an existing template is really easy, actually building a flow from scratch, that's the same as it ever has been. If you've done that before, you know that it's not quite as easy as maybe it ideally would. So you can build out flows in your organization and then share them as templates with other people. So that way the business users still get that simple experience, but you still have a lot of value because you're building out that process to meet whatever organizational needs you have. So I don't foresee, you know, less need for app makers. In fact, I foresee there's going to be even more need for app makers as there's more processes that people realize can be automated, but also need to be customized to your organization.
I completely agree. And I think it's lovely to see that Microsoft use your own tools. It's not like you just kind of wrote a method of being able to say hello to people. You literally put Power Automate in there so that everybody else could automate it. That's great.
Exactly.
Okay, we've got some questions coming through. So very informative. Could you provide more examples of when you could use an adaptive card? When can't you use an adaptive card?
Yeah, that's almost a better response. I mean, it's really, you can do that experience where you kick it off on a message. You can also send an adaptive card in a message. So I think like here, for example, you can see here that this is actually just an adaptive card. Oh no, I'm not showing my desktop anymore. But anyway, there's an adaptive card that you just have there, and it can be right inside a message. So you can do it really to kick off flows or in the middle of a process.
Awesome. So another one. Oh yeah, okay. From what I can see, it's not possible to kick workflow off from a document within Teams. That's a fair point.
Yeah, that's true. So at the moment, we don't have that capability. You know, that's definitely something that we'll add at some point. But yeah, today it's really for messages that you can do inside of Teams.
We do that in our organisation. We literally jump to SharePoint and kick it off from there, and the approval process works within Teams, but you can't actually kick it off from there. So yeah, just one more step to make. Okay, there is a workflow create task for a specific message on the roadmap. It was postponed more often. Will that be deployed soon? I've already built this myself. It's not that difficult. Great question.
Yeah, I'd have to double check why that got delayed, but yeah, it's the great thing about the platform is you can always kind of build it out yourself and work around these capabilities. So I'm sure we'll get to it soon if it's delayed at the moment.
There is a link on there for you, Stephen, so you can check that one out with the roadmap item there. Cool. Last one, can you lock down who can create flows? Oh, such a common question.
So at a high level, our goal is that Power Automate can really be used by anybody inside an organization. Ultimately, if you really want to, you can turn off Power Automate for certain users. I personally don't recommend that because I think that there's other policies you can put in place to really manage what people can do. So, for example, you can create what we call DLP policies to configure what connectors people can use. So if you don't want them, for example, to be creating flows over, SQL or, other kinds of business data, you can lock that down, but still permit them to create flows like the ones we just saw. They're, simple, like send a welcome message to a Teams chat. But yeah, if you really want to, you can shut down Power Automate for a user entirely, but I would not recommend that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of fear around these things, isn't there? But actually, you're not giving any more freedom than you've potentially got with like Excel and email anyway, right? That's right. So yeah, it's better to give people the ability to curate and to automate their business processes than it is to take that away. But that's a whole panel conversation right there. Oh, that's an easy one. So Mark's asked, have you got a blog?
Yeah, so if you go to flow.microsoft.com/blog, which I can put in the chat here as well, that has all of the new capabilities and things that we're working on. So definitely recommend checking that out.
Awesome. A couple more coming in. Is it possible to launch a Power Automate flow when a user joins a Teams meeting? Okay.
So we don't have a capability to do that. You can have a Power App that runs as a part of Teams meetings, and Power Apps can have buttons that kick off flows, but I don't think there's a way to have kind of an automated process at the moment that runs when somebody joins a meeting.
So once we go live on YouTube with all of these sessions, Reza Durrani was talking about that earlier, having the Power Apps in the actual meeting itself. So yeah, that's a good session to go back to. Another one, so currently it's not possible to attach multiple files to an approval. Will that change?
That is something that I think we'll be adding in the future. I don't have a specific roadmap item for it, but it is something that's planned.
Awesome. We're at the end of the list. Has anybody else got any more questions you want to ask, or do you want to come off mute? Oh.
If I could jump in, Stephen, thank you so much. This is great. I come from the Dynamics Dataverse side and branched into the whole Power Platform and Teams and all of that. So adaptive cards, when I first heard about them and saw people talking about them, they were all, you had to use code to create them. So I haven't used a visual designer. So how long has that been around, and is code still needed to do anything specific?
So it's been around for at least a year.
Okay.
So it's certainly a little bit mature at this point. It's not like a preview feature. There are kind of some edge cases where you may still want to edit the JSON directly. But yeah, for basic things, dragging and dropping inputs and those types of things, yeah, you can do that all using that visual designer. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And then for approvals, are they living in the Dataverse and the personal productivity environment, the default environment, or can we access those put them in a model-driven app or anything like that? Can we relate approvals to other kinds of records?
Yeah, you absolutely can. So the approvals data is in that personal productivity environment by default. There's actually a setting, and I didn't show it there. You may have seen it, but you can actually choose to send an approval to a different environment if you want.
Cool.
By default, it is in the the default environment. And yeah, that data is in Dataverse, so you can build applications that read that information, that show it in dashboards, that show other information on top of it. So that absolutely is possible.
And we could set approvals related to other data in that environment.
Yes, I believe you can build relationships between the
create relationships from the approval to other tables in there. Cool. Yeah. All right, cool. Thanks. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
One more question. What's a good source of information for citizen developers? Wow, so many.
Yeah, there's a ton. I would say Microsoft Learn is probably one of the best places to get started, as well as the community. You know, all of the various communities that we have. But yeah, one of those two places.
Awesome. I'm doing Cloudflow using connecting to on-premise gateway and then to Power Automate. Can I have more than one gateway? Question from George.
On a single machine, you can only have one gateway. But if you have multiple machines, you can absolutely have multiple gateways.
Okay, you're at the end of the list. Give it 2 seconds, though. I'm sure somebody's got more questions to ask. I actually think we have a hand up as well. Let's have a look.
And yeah, George, it can run on the different machines, same account will work.
Okay, I think that hand's gone down.
Great.
Hang on. Awesome session. Getting some good feedback. Yeah, it can or cannot. George is saying
it can. It can run the same account on different machines. That's right. Yeah.
Perfect.
Cool.
Okay.
Well, thanks so much.
Yeah. So if you've got any more questions for Stephen, please feel free to contact him directly. He is on both LinkedIn and Twitter, I know, because I tweeted about him a little while ago. And so you can contact him directly or go to the blog and comment on some of the articles that are written there. That's always a great idea if you want to get some engagement, because loads of us hang out there as a community. So if you've got any more questions, do forward them on. I'll be here for a little while longer because we've got Charles Lamana coming up. And if you want to continue to ask questions, I'll make sure they get forwarded on to Stephen. We'll also be posting this on YouTube and you'll be able to chat underneath that as well. So do feel free to get in touch. And thank you everybody for attending. Thank you so much, Stephen, for such a good session, such good energy. Love it.
Yep.